Hello and welcome. Chris from Missouri here, bringing you another video about vintage baseball cards. And guys, it is Thursday. And if you watch this channel, you know what we do on Thursdays here. We do something called Just a Bit Outside. And what that is players that were really, really good, but are still just not quite good enough to be in the Hall of Fame or not voted in the Hall of Fame for one reason or the other. Now this, I say it all the time, but this is coming very special for me. The people that leave comments, you guys that watch this and leave really, some incredible statements and stuff. And I know there's people you want me to show, but right now what I'm showing is players who had rookie cards prior to 1980. Now I know I break that rule every once in a while, but I typically show 3 or 4 cards, and most of them are in that 1980 or before their rookie cards are. Now, I'm talking about 4 guys today, and the first 2 that I talk about, I think they got a big group of following that believe that they should be in the Hall of Fame, and I may be one of them. But also, the last 2 that I'm going to talk about, I'm glad to speak of them because I wish that you would get either their cards out or look them up, especially if you don't really remember them. Now, the first guy that I want to talk about is a second baseman, and he has a super high WAR, and that's called wins above replacement. But if somebody can break that term WAR down to where somebody like me can understand what it is. And I even go for it. A guy that I respect, a writer that I respect, Bill James, came up with this stat. And a lot of us throw this around when we're describing how good a player is. His WAR is this. Well, this guy has an incredible WAR, and I wonder why. And it made me look at some stuff. And the guy that I'm going to show you at second base, who has an incredible WAR, who a lot of people, and maybe me, thinks that he belongs in the Hall of Fame, is none other than Bobby Grich. And here's the 1971 Topps Bobby Grich. Now, let's talk about him just a little bit. He had a 71.1 WAR, and that's higher than a lot of second basemen. I mean, a lot of second basemen. Now, he only, when I say only, it's still a lot, but he did not quite have 2,000 hits. He had 1,833 hits. He had some power at second base because he had 224 home runs, and that's quite a bit. He had less than 1,000 RBI, but remember, he's a second baseman. He had 864. He had a 266 batting average. He was a 6-time All-Star. He was a 4-time Gold Glove winner when second basemen were tough to get Gold Gloves from, because that was a time when Frank White was around, Willie Randolph, and even Lou Whitaker. He was 4 times in the MVP consideration. He won a Silver Slugger, but I don't know a whole lot about him. I watched him play, and when I saw him play, I thought of him as an all-star. And a lot of times back then, when you think of somebody as an all-star, a young mind at the time like myself, I thought of him as a future Hall of Famer. But when I look at people that he's, at that Baseball Reference, who they talk about who he's most likely, it really comes up with Chase Utley. Now, Chase Utley's not a Hall of Famer. He's got some great stats. Good argument maybe to be in the Hall of Fame, but I don't know. So Bobby Grich, his WAR is 8th all time, and what I think about him a lot is his on-base percentage is good. He took a lot of pitches. He was a great team player, but he has a higher WAR than like Fox and Randolph and Bobby Doerr and Lazary and Biggio and Mazeroski. And those are some great players. But I don't know if he's reached that status to get in the Hall of Fame. But I think his name's going to keep coming up time and time again. Tell me what you think of Bobby Grich. Tell me what you think about the stats on WAR. And, if I was going to say, does Bobby Grich belong in the Hall of Fame? This might be one of the few times this during Just a Bit Outside that I'm going to say I believe Bobby Grich belongs in the Hall of Fame. Now, the next guy that I'm going to talk about is this two guys in a row that a lot of people think belong in the Hall of Fame, and that's just how this fell, to tell you the truth. And that's none other than Keith Hernandez. Now, we've talked about Keith Hernandez here before. Haven't really showed his card, which is 1975 rookie infielder's card. But Keith Hernandez has this tidal wave of fans behind him that want him to be in the Hall of Fame. Now, this time he's a first baseman, and his WAR is not as high as even Bobby Grich's. And his WAR is 60.3. He has 2,182 hits, which is a lot of hits for a first baseman. He only had 162 home runs and a 1,071 RBI. But he did bat 296. Now, I remember saying one time that I thought Keith Hernandez was one of the weakest MVP award winners of all time in 1979 when he shared that with Willie Stargell. But I'm kind of reeling that back in now that I try to look him up more and I always had an argument about why he shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame instead of the other. But I'm going to just be I'm going to be independent here. I don't really have a dog in the hunt. I don't care if he gets in or gets out or not get in. But man, he had 11 Golden Gloves. He was one of the best fielding first basemen of all time. And I know every once in a while I put down the Gold Glove Award, but his defensive WAR is really high. He was a 5-time All-Star. He was in consideration for MVP 8 times. He won an MVP, and he was also a runner-up MVP. I just remember him playing, and that 5-time All-Star, I just never thought of him very much. But that All-Star position when he was playing was a lot of times taken up by guys like Steve Garvey and even Pete Rose. Now, if you look on the back of his cards, the people that he's close to are Cecil Cooper. We've talked about Cecil earlier. John Olerud, really good defensive first baseman and a good player. And Mark Grace, another good defensive player. Now, I don't want to give much credit to Mark Grace because I got a buddy named Coop that's a big Mark Grace fan, and I don't want to stroke his ego at all. But golly, Keith Hernandez, it just seems like he was quite the player. But again, this brings up the WAR talk to me. Wins above replacement. He only had a 60 WAR, and Bobby Grich had a 71 WAR. In most all the offensive categories, Keith Hernandez was better than. Defensive categories, Keith Hernandez was better than. But yet Bobby Grich, who didn't have just a lengthy career, has a higher WAR. So somebody, I know it's remedial. I know I can learn it, and I will. But just enlighten me a little bit with your thoughts on the WAR issue in the comments. But keep it easy on me. Don't tear me apart too hard. Now the fun part begins with me. I'm going to show you 2 rookie cards here. They're both multiplayer rookie cards. One's a 1976 rookie pitcher. And when I watched him pitch, man, he was good. Had a 47.8 WAR, which doesn't warrant Hall of Fame statistics. He was 170 and 91 as a pitcher on a really, really good team. He had a 3.29 ERA, and he had 1,775 Ks, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it was for the length that he pitched. He was a 4-time All-Star, and he was a 5-time Golden Glove winner as a pitcher. And if you saw him, you would see that he was athletic enough that you thought he could fill his position. better than, like we talked about, Rick Russell, who was a heavy guy that didn't seem all that athletic, or even Phil Niekro, who won some Golden Gloves. This guy was athletic. One-time Cy Young Award winner, and he's a one-time runner-up. And I am talking to you about Ron Guidry. Left-handed, he had this slider kind of pitch that would just, you'd swing, a batter would swing at it, a right-handed batter would swing at it and almost hit him in the right foot. The ball broke so much. And he had a 1978 season like no other season. It could have been and might be one of the greatest modern pitching seasons of all time. Arguably one of. And if you saw him pitch, I believe you would think the same thing. And when he was on the mound, he looked like a Hall of Famer. Do I think he's going to get in? No. But man, I would think this warrants enough. I would like you to get out his card, or you to get out Baseball Reference and check out his stats and see how good he was. And the other pitcher that I'm going to show you, multiplayer rookie card, is a 1972 card. And this pitcher had a 22.2 WAR. Not very good at all. He won 107 games and lost 70 with a 3.15 ERA, which was incredible. And he was just under 1,500 strikeouts. He was a 3-time top 10 Cy Young Award winner, and he was a 1-time All-Star, and we're going to talk about that. And tomorrow would be his 75th birthday, and I'm talking to you about J.R. Richard. Now, there's a lot of people watching this, a lot of young people that don't know who J.R. Richard was. But let me tell you something. J.R. Richard was an ace on the Houston Astros staff. Same time Nolan Ryan was on there. Now, I am not saying J.R. Richard was better than Nolan Ryan, because he was not. But he had 2 seasons. J.R. Richard had 2 seasons where he had over 300 strikeouts. Now, he broke 100 miles an hour a lot. He threw hard. How would you like to be a batter in one game have to face J.R. Richard, and the next game you had to face Nolan Ryan in their prime? Now, J.R. Richard made the All-Star team in 1980. And this is what bothers me, is because the way I thought of him in 1980. I was just a kid, 13 years old, and I remember my dad questioning the guts and stuff of JR. They thought he was, lollygagging a little bit. And he every once in a while he had arm issues. And the last time that I remember seeing him pitch was the 1980 All-Star game. And they took him out of the All-Star game, and I just remember not thinking very highly of him. And then he had a stroke. And he went from being one of the great pitchers in the game. Matter of fact, Johnny Bench caught him in that All-Star game and said he never had caught somebody that the ball sounded like that. And Johnny Bench got struck out many a time by J.R. Richard, and there's some highlights of it. But J.R., he was 6'8". I think even his baseball card says he was 6'8", but he's 6'7", 6'8". And he had that big old long stretch when he stepped to deliver the ball, and it looked like he was handing the ball to the catcher. I mean, just incredible. And when I think back at him, I wish I never had any ill thoughts about him, because again, he was a troubled man. And after that stroke, he ended up being homeless and different things. But then he kind of picked himself up, and I saw an interview where he never regretted anything that he did or his career. But please take this time and look him up. If you got to see him play, tell me what your thoughts about him was, and reflect on his career a little bit. Do I think Ron Guidry is going to get in the Hall of Fame? No. Do I think J.R. Richards is going to get in the Hall of Fame? No. But at one time, they were as good as any Hall of Famer. Now, I love this series. Keep bringing it on with the comments. Keep bringing it with who you would like me to see talk about. Remember, I'm trying to keep rookie cards under 1980, before 1980. This is a blast. And I love doing Thursdays just a bit outside. But guys, this is supposed to be fun, right? So remember, it's just a hobby. Collect what you like.